All right, everybody. Today we're going to be dissecting or talking about this article where Eiji Aonuma did an interview with IGN, and he had a couple of quotes that have kind of made their rounds. I've seen it talked about on Reddit. I've seen it talked about on Facebook and some other places. So I said, okay, let's do a video over this. And he says, well, I do think we as people have a tendency to want the things that we don't currently have, and there's a bit of grass is greener mentality. He said, and he's been working, it looks like, since maybe Ocarina of Time. And his other quote is, it's interesting when I hear people say they prefer the old entries because I was wondering, why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the type of things or ways you can play? But I do understand that desire that we have for nostalgia, and so I also understand it from that aspect. And before we dive too deep into this, my daughter's playing in the room beside me, so if you hear, just kind of pardon her. She's one. Okay, so that's kind of the basis of what a lot of people are saying, and I went looking through comments, and what really surprised me is the people who are like, yeah, I miss old Zelda. And that kind of surprised me because, there's a lot of hype with the Game Awards and everything for Tears of the Kingdom, and Breath of the Wild was considered the golden standard for open world games. Shoot, we even just did a video maybe a week or 2 weeks ago over 5 games that did open world gaming perfectly, and Zelda Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom was in our list, So I thought it was very interesting to see people come at them and say, yeah, we're kind of tired of this open world Zelda. Now, I will say that I was very early to the not liking the new format, which may sound weird, but I'm about to kind of retell my history with Breath of the Wild and with Zelda in general, and you guys will kind of see what I have to say about it. You'll see how my opinion has changed over time, and maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't. But here's basically my story with Breath of the Wild as we talk about new Zelda or old Zelda, which was better, and moving forward, which should Zelda do? So these comments were made in regards to people apparently wanting to go back to the old formulaic Zelda. When talking about Breath of the Wild, personally, I got my Wii U the Christmas of 2013. And Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Smash Bros. Wii U were the two main reasons I got the machine. I remember waiting years from when they announced Breath of the Wild to when it finally released. I believe it was the last first-party Nintendo game to come out for the console. This was one of my most anticipated releases of my whole life. And playing through it, it lived up to the hype. So many people back then wanted to focus on the changes as if they were negatives. No heart pieces, no traditional dungeons, and no loose linear structure. Everything had changed, and I found myself defending it. The shrines were a modern and sleek way to give the players a sense of progress, and it even granted the player freedom with how they would choose to strengthen Link. Want to survive battles easier? Go for heart containers. Want to have a smoother time traversing the wild? Fill that stamina bar up, baby. I loved the way we were piecing together the world and the lore through memories, and the Korok seeds were a collectathoner's dream. I loved my time with it. But when my time with it was through, I had no urge to replay it. And in fact, I find myself saying it's my second least favorite Zelda game, only above Zelda 2. Why is that? Truthfully, guys, the world just feels hollow. Nothing makes me want to replay or revisit it. It was a blast playing it for the first time and discovering everything, but nothing hooked me enough to make me want to replay it. Whereas Wind Waker on Wii U jumped up to maybe my second favorite Zelda. What's the difference? Wind Waker feels like an epic quest. Setting sail with nothing and watching Link become the hero he was always meant to be is just something special. Wind Waker is pretty open world too. It doesn't suffer from the hollow issues. There's always an island to explore, treasures that await, monsters to defeat. It has some of my favorite NPCs and items in the whole series. It's a massive open world that doesn't feel empty nor tedious. Which gets me to what I want to talk about today. Is Breath of the Wild really different from the rest of the series, and was that a positive shift? People act like Breath of the Wild was the first open world Zelda game. Many could argue the original Zelda was one of the first ever open world games in general. As the player can explore easily, I believe, the first 3 dungeons before you start needing items. It really does feel like most of Hyrule is available to you right from the start. The other games may be a bit stricter with progression, but most of the cities are available after you leave your hometown. I mean, think about it in Wind Waker. Very few islands are off guard or off limits from you even, like landing there, right? And in Ocarina of Time, a lot of the world is already open up to you. Not entirely in the same way that Breath of the Wild is, but a good bit of it. With really only the dungeons and heart pieces really locked behind items. I think Breath of the Wild handled open world perfectly, as I discussed in the video I was mentioning earlier. They give you a brief tutorial, all your runes, and say have fun. And boy, did we have fun. But if you're like me, the runes just weren't enough. Breath of the Wild can get teased for being called a sandbox physics engine. There can be some truth to that with the magnet and stasis. And of course, the bombs were a must-return for the franchise, as they are arguably the most iconic item in the series, and Krynos was the welcomed addition to Link's arsenal. But I found myself missing items like the Lens of Truth, the Hookshot, and many others. And we knew we weren't getting them. The runes in Tears of the Kingdom are all relatively fresh ideas here. Ultra Hand is awesome, allowing Link to interact with so many objects in the game world. Fuse, admittedly, may be one that I underutilize, but as the name suggests, it grants Link the power to combine objects together. Recall, in my opinion, is the most lame one yet, but it plays nicely with the idea of Zelda being a physics engine. Ascend is easily one of my favorite Zelda power-ups in any game, and in my opinion, it's what sold me on Tears of the Kingdom as an evolution and not just a carbon copy of Breath of the Wild. It gives Link the ability to travel through surfaces to reach new heights. It's amazing for exploring and discovering new areas and locations. While I don't believe the runes are as cool as the old school items, they were definitely a nice way to break from the mold while still maintaining a semblance of the old Zelda. Some of the most fun I have playing Zelda is reaching a location that is inaccessible at the moment and thinking, man, I wonder what item gets me in here. Or, what is hiding behind that secret area? It's a great motivator to encourage players to return and re-explore areas they thought they were through with. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom still offer many puzzles that can give you that aha moment through the shrines, of which there are a lot. And I'm not one who hates on the Divine Beast, as I found myself enjoying them more than others seem to. To me, oddly enough, the issue is just that the world feels empty. The chests that you find will offer nothing special. As weapons break, you have all your items from the start, and heart pieces are gained through shrines. Meaning if you see a chest off in the distance, you know you won't find anything in there that's really worthwhile. All this is to say that yes, at its core, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the most open world the series has ever been. But at what cost? And I think that's what I really want to focus on today. As the lands, in my opinion, just aren't worth exploring. The Korok Seeds are the only real thing here worth collecting, and they were just used to expand inventory slots. Which is good, trust me, it comes in handy. But it's hardly worth all the time it would take to track them all down. I often circle back around to Ocarina of Time or Wind Waker because I feel like they are near perfect games and they capture what it means to be on grand adventures. They are a perfect blend of open world while maintaining direction. Every action feels like it has a purpose and adds to the bigger picture. Nothing feels forced or time consuming. Everything feels like it's here for a reason. Things are fun to explore and they have rewards. That's the issue with giving you everything up front. You won't be rewarded with light arrows or magic or any of the sorts. So, how do you fix Zelda moving forward? It's a tough problem to have. By removing items and rewards, you're removing part of the fun in exploring these worlds. However, if you introduce all these things back in, you complicate the game, thus sacrificing what works about the 2 newest Zelda outings. I think my simplest solution is this. Find a way to blend runes with the progression items of old Zelda games. Runes will be given all at once and from the beginning like they have been the last 2 games. while progression items will be concentrated mostly on dungeons. Keep the shrines, but reduce the numbers. Shrines will still extend stamina, while heart pieces return to the overworld. Yes, players no longer have to choose between the two, but I mean, really, who cares? Video games are meant to be fun. And players can skip one or the other if they want a challenge. This is how I would fix things. It would give the open world more of a purpose while still keeping the new open world feel that the games are crafting. So essentially, guys, what it's getting at is a term I'm calling open world fallacy. Part of what makes these Zelda games work is they give you everything up front and there's nowhere off limits. And that's what's always drawn me to the new games. But it's also why I fizzle out and never put as much time into them as I should. Admittedly, I beat Breath of the Wild. I have not beat Tears of the Kingdom yet. And it's just because, like, okay, sweet. I have every relevant item right from the start. There's nowhere to explore where I'm going to find something that's going to, I don't know, make me stronger or be worth collecting other than the shrines. I mean, the shrines, I guess, are the antithesis to this argument, you know. But I think that's the issue with the games is they simplify it. They give you everything up front. It's truly how an open world game should be. There's nowhere off limits. But as a result, there's nowhere worth exploring. That's how I've always seen it. And if they want to start adding in old elements of the game, they're going to remove what these two games have built. So I call it the open world fallacy. And that's just my opinion on it, guys. I'd love to hear what y'all think. Do you want more of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? Or do you want something new? I view Zelda as always on the cutting edge. They're always trying to reinvent Zelda. I mean, people who think Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are the same game, you can tell they haven't really played it. They're two completely different games, and Twilight Princess and Wind Waker are completely different games. So it's tough for me to imagine that the third Zelda game, since Breath of the Wild, is going to be exactly like these two. Zelda is always doing something to reinvent itself, you know. So I do think it'll change. I'm just not sure how moving forward. But, you know, I'd love to hear what you guys think about open worlds, because I was telling Jessica, I think Tears of the Kingdom is just coming out at a time when everybody has open world fatigue. When you have an open world game, elements start to lose meaning. A lot of people who are against open world gaming want a more, I mean, they just feel like the open world removes the seriousness of the story and gives too much like flexibility or, you know, something like that. It's why I give the Fallout games credit. They probably have the most compelling story I've seen in an open world game where your decisions can affect the story. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I've talked a lot about this. I've proposed my solution, how I would design it, you know, in the future games. I would have your runes, if we're going to stick with runes, I would have runes affect shrines, and I would have progression items affect dungeons. I would bring dungeons back, you know, give us 7 dungeons, 8 dungeons, whatever you want, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there. And have your hook shot and your bombs and, you know, your hammer or arrows or whatever directly impact dungeons. And maybe you can make it where dungeons are optional if you really want that open world feel. It's like, okay, here's the Zelda game, and you don't have to do the dungeons. Maybe you can make the dungeons how you get the Master Sword. So it's like you can go fight Ganon without the Master Sword and do all this. You don't have to do the dungeons. I don't know. I trust them to figure out what they want to do next, though it seems a lot of people are reading this and thinking that formulaic Zelda is dead and that they'll never go back to that and it's all open world from here on out. But I think Zelda changes too much for us to sit here and say, yes, the next 5 Zelda games are going to be exactly like Breath of the Wild. I think we've learned that, you know, Link to the Past was groundbreaking. And then it went to 3D, you know, and Ocarina of Time was groundbreaking. And then we got Majora's Mask, and then we got Wind Waker. So it's not like they just sat there and remade Ocarina of Time 5 times. So I just don't think we're going to get Breath of the Wild 5 more times. I think they'll do something different. But anyway, that's all I have to say about it, guys. Let me know down below. Are you team new Zelda, team old Zelda? Are you team open world Zelda or team formulaic Zelda, you know? Let me know what camp you fall into, and let me know how you would take Zelda in the next game. What direction would you take it? Would you try to evolve on the open world, everything's given to you at once formula, or would you start to implement more rigidness? You know, they say time is a circle. Would you try to go back to more like linear story where you need progression items to go through dungeons? Yeah, let me know, guys, because I feel like my favorite games are kind of, again, like Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, where it's a mix. When I'm dropped off into the game, there's enough freedom where I can do things in the order I want, but there's still a structure to it. When I get my hook shot, I start thinking like, okay, where can I go to now that I have the hook shot? Okay, I have the bombs. Where can I go to now? Okay, I've got the arrows. Where can I go to now? I like that thought process a little more. But let me know what you guys think down below. I've talked enough. Go check out our video, Games That Did Open World Perfectly, and let us know what you think. That's going to do it for this one. We will see you in the next one.